Hi, everybody. Welcome to Transformational Psychology. My name is Ryan Holsapple. Today I'm going to talk to you about a short little clip from Jordan Peterson's podcast where I feel he shows his true character and also provides us with a lesson into the importance of humility and self-inquiry and checking one's own confirmation biases. So let's get straight into it here and talk about what exactly he said. But first, you need to hear the clip.
Look, sometimes it's a reasonable critique. Distrusts the left because it doesn't trust that its social welfare instincts aren't going to be then subsumed into their socialist instincts, aren't then going to be subsumed by a deep desire to have communism. So the right doesn't trust the left. Now, I think there are elements of the right that have, particularly in America, deeply overstated the proximity of communism to the American political system.
Do you think I'm one of those?
No, I don't.
Why not?
Well, I think
It's something I worry about, when I'm looking at this positive feedback loop situation arise. I can't help but see similarities in the social identity movement and the Marxist movement. And you make that case in your book, so maybe you're one of them too,
Sure.
I don't know if this is a situation where, the left purports to see fascism lurking behind every right-wing move. And do you think the right is just as culpable with regards to seeing communism behind every left-wing move? I
think it's risk.
Complicated. I guess I wonder how much conscience scouring. Everyone's asking themselves that, I suppose, now, how much conscience scouring is in order after the events on the Hill last week or 2 weeks ago.
So right there, where you hear him really questioning whether or not he's engaging in this confirmation loop, I think is a telltale sign of humility, really, and willingness to be wrong and to be flawed. He's very critical of things that the radical left do, and here we're hearing a real earnest questioning of, am I off track? Now, for all of those people out there who think this guy's malevolent or has bad intentions or really just has some sort of racist, white supremacist bias in his psyche, I think that for anybody who's reasonable, which many people aren't, for anybody who's a reasonable onlooker, this moment, just look at this moment. He is willing to say, look, maybe I've got this whole thing wrong. Maybe I'm throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Maybe everything I see on the left that I criticize is just me smuggling in a straw man, which is called Stalinism or communism or postmodernism or whatever it would be, and I'm exaggerating it and turning it into the worst possible scenario, which is actually an overreaction or an overcompensation. Is that what I'm doing, Douglas? Do you think that's what I'm doing? Now, Douglas doesn't really go into great detail answering that. He just straight up says, no, I don't think you're doing that. So why is this important on this channel where I cover transformational psychology? It's important because it shows humility and it shows a willingness to backtrack and take a step back and look at one's worldviews. And if we're not willing to do that in life, we've really pigeonholed ourselves. We've set ourselves up to become possessed by an idea, possessed by a certain intuition that we want to create post hoc reasoning to make us feel more secure in our world. And that is so much of what we see going on in the world right now, is that people have these intuitions, they have these beliefs, they have these ways of being, and they want to confirm those ways of being through their rationality, sometimes to the extent that they don't really care if their reasoning is consistent or if it's flawed. They just care that they're justifying their worldview. So if you're one of those people, first of all, who has wondered, is Jordan Peterson somebody who is at least being authentic Whether you agree with him or not on his positions is a totally different discussion. The question here is he being authentic? Is he earnest? Is he trying to do his best in the world? I think this moment settles that question pretty well, if you didn't already feel that question was settled for you. People who have intentions that are inauthentic or somewhat twisted don't typically expose themselves to criticism in such a vulnerable way in front of hundreds of thousands of people, perhaps millions, that are going to listen to that podcast and hear uncertainty and willingness to be wrong. What you'll see with people who are dishonest or disingenuous is typically they will double down and they will become hyperinflated and refuse to show that sort of humility. They'll actually tend to show more of an arrogant self-assuredness, or more of a sense that everybody else is full of shit, or anybody who disagrees with me is full of shit. They won't really give the devil his due. They'll be very convinced of themselves in a way that will tend to be off-putting by anyone who isn't captured by their cult of personality, right? Because it's very easy to become swindled by people who are very sure of themselves, because it kind of compensates for the parts of us as humans. When we feel unsure and we find someone who is sure, then there's kind of this way that it fills a need inside of our psyche, and it allows us to be like, oh, okay, like this person knows. I don't know, but this person knows. And so if I listen to this person, then I'm fulfilling this not knowing inside of myself, and that's creating a sense of security. And so a lot of times people who know everything can, quote unquote, know everything, can attract people who have these insecurities about maybe they don't know enough, or they're not feeling so sure of themselves, so they're looking for somebody to give them the answers. So aside from Jordan Peterson's personality, which is really outside of the scope of what I typically cover in this podcast, I'm not covering culture and trying to suss out political truths or ideological viewpoints or philosophical debates within society. What I'm really trying to do is talk about transformational psychology and how we can live authentically and grow and learn in life in a really proactive manner. And so one of the reasons I wanted to share this is because I think it shows one of the ways that we can do that. I think Jordan Peterson models that. For him to show willingness to say, hey, have I got this wrong, is quite a model for people to strive to meet. So if we look at all the areas in our life where we feel certain about something, or we really feel invested in a particular belief or a style of rhetoric, and we're not willing to do what Peterson did here, if we're not willing to say, hey, have I got this wrong? Do you think I'm off track here? Is it possible that I've made a mistake? Am I making an error? If we're not willing to do that, there's an issue with our authentic humility. And the lesson that I take from this is always be willing to question, always be willing to see our own humanness, always be asking, have I gone too far? Am I making an error that I'm just blind to because I'm engaging in this automatic reflexive confirmation bias? And just forcing ourselves to arduously really commit to this process of reflection, that is one of the most important virtues in living a meaningful life, is that sort of humility, that sort of willingness. Now, that doesn't mean we let go of our convictions and we surrender to the whims of the winds of changing opinions and criticisms. No, because that would be overly compensatory to the other extreme, which would be not willing to commit to a view, not willing to take a stand. Absolutely not. One of the things that Roger Strachan, who's my mentor in psychology, has taught me is when you believe something, believe it with all your heart. Commit to it. Make it real for yourself. And when you find contrary evidence that seems to disprove it, or does disprove it for that minute, he says you drop it like a hot potato and you pick up the next thing. And you commit to it with the same intention, with the same maximal focus and energy. What's the lesson in that? The lesson is to do our best, really, is to fully live that which is true for us, to fully lean into life, and to be willing to drop that view as soon as we see that there's a better one. And that's what Jordan Peterson modeled on that podcast. Now, again, it doesn't really matter if you think his particular views politically, psychologically are relevant or robust. What really matters here is this moment of authenticity, which is modeling a meta virtue for the personality to perhaps attempt to embody through life. And even if this moment doesn't represent his entire life, or you don't particularly think that this is an indicator like I do of his character, that's fine. That's a separate conversation. I tend to believe that he has shown his true colors here. That doesn't matter, though. What really matters is, let's take this story, let's leave the man out of it, and let's think, what does it mean to be able to let go and to take a step back and to take a deep breath and to say, am I on the right track here? Hit the pause button. Let go of some of the tension, let go of some of the confirmation bias. Be willing to start fresh. Thank you for listening to this analysis. I wish you all a wonderful day or evening, afternoon, depending on when this is that you happen to be listening and where you are. You can subscribe to Transformational Psychology. I do a podcast. I have guests on. I do monologues. And the general idea is the question of living a meaningful life in a coherent and vigorous way that is supported by both evidence and phenomenological philosophy, psychology, in a way that gives people real tools that they can apply to their lives rather than just abstract ideas. Welcome to Transformational Psychology. My name is Ryan Holsapple. I created this podcast because I believe that human beings have the capacity to transform and live deeply meaningful lives. My podcast is based on two pillars: education and transformation. The educational branch allows us to explore the cutting-edge psychology of transformation and many important theoretical ideas. Monologues, interviews with experts, and transformational concepts are presented for the audience to engage with and reflect on. I also believe it is of the utmost importance that people have practical transformational tools for making real life changes. So this podcast still provides applicable and digestible guidance to complement the theoretical component. It is my hope that this podcast offers education and transformational guidance to a world that is seeking meaning and connection.